Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am joined today by Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, how's it going, my friend?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A lovely day to be neighborly.
You know, I want to ask you because I feel like I've been inundated with the great word, by the way. I probably didn't use it right.
Inundated?
Yes.
That sounds like somebody's ripped off your drawers, man.
Yeah, well, you know, that happens when I watch Clemson play, but there was a silver lining there. I see all this Dr. Pepper stuff. How do you feel about the Dr. Pepper?
That is the nastiest ass crap I have ever tasted in my life. There isn't enough money that could make me try and drink a full can of Dr. Pepper.
Oh, man, you're rotten. Diet Dr. Pepper is amazing stuff, man. And they make a Dr. Pepper barbecue sauce, too. It's pretty good. It goes good with the chicken nuggies. So, anyways, my friend.
It's vomitous.
You know, all these things tie into the Steelers on today's show, but we almost got like a cornucopia of things going on here. Also a great word. We like to use big words that confuse ourselves and our listeners. It's customary. I don't know. I think the first one, since we were just talking off the air about potential Hall of Fame plans and stuff, Steelers could have up to 4 guys going in this year. Bill Cowher surprised over the weekend. And I don't think they've ever done this before with anybody, Brian, right? They come out on the CBS pregame show, and what's his name? Is it Dave Baker, I think? That's the head of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He heads up the whole thing. He's a huge guy, too, man. I mean,
He is.
And he walks like a gentle giant, doesn't he? I imagine he could crush your hand if he wanted to with a handshake, but he doesn't. He looks like he's just, very calm and relaxed. I mean, he's such a cool character for this spot. And for everything I hear, people just rave with the way he's organized and how he handles all these things, including those who vote on all this stuff. But he comes out and, as soon as he comes out, I think everybody that was there kind of knew that this was for Bill Cowher. He's going to go in the centennial part of the class, right, with the coaches. And, he's the first guy announced officially. There's 15 going in, I believe, as this centennial Pro Football Hall of Fame class. Steelers could have up to 4. And I just got to throw some shade at some people on Twitter that were, they were mocking Jimmy Johnson, also very deserving, by the way, maybe more deserving than Cowher, to be completely honest. They were saying, hey, Jimmy Johnson didn't get surprised on the pregame show. Does that mean, he's not going in? And, there were different ways that people had takes on that, tasteful and distasteful. And then at halftime, Dave Baker comes out, man, and it was a surprise. And I thought it was very cool. I thought it was very cool to watch and how they had planned to do that with both of those guys. And it starts to get you a little hyped up about all the Hall of Fame stuff. But we know Troy Polamalu is a finalist. He should be, unless he gets snubbed like they did the NFL 100, then you could burn the whole hall down for all I care, because he has to be first ballot. He has to go in this year. And Alan Faneca has been, biding his time. I thought he should have went in over Kevin Mawai last year. I think they try and sell tickets. They try and sell tickets to the Hall of Fame game. Selling tickets to the ceremony, I don't think is usually difficult. You're going to have your headliners, the people who are going to put butts in seats, and the way you do that is that you have somebody like a Troy Polamalu and then like another guy. I don't really want to say secondary guy, but we all think offensive linemen are sexy, but I don't think Alan Faneca on the marquee is going to put butts in seats, especially people who are not Steelers fans. But you pair them with somebody like Polamalu, all Steelers Nation is going to show up there. You know what I mean? And,
absolutely.
And then you're going to have the same thing maybe with Cowher and Donnie Shell, who was a very long-time deserving guy. It's going to be a Steelers Nation invasion once again, and probably even more so than it was with the Jerome Bettis induction there in Canton.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a nice tip and a FYI for our listeners, the Hall of Fame for the modern class is going to be August 6th to 9th. That's going to be when potentially Troy and Faneca go in. But if you think you're going to get a 4-for-1 shot, you're wrong. Because
wish.
the centennial celebration, which will be when they induct that centennial class, is September 16th through 19th. So be forewarned. If you want to go, you may have to go twice.
Yeah, and that's going to be an odd weekend. I wonder how they're going to do that, because you're going to have Thursday night football. I mean, the NFL season's got to kick off that weekend. I'm assuming that it might be a week later than usual.
Wouldn't it?
Usually, it's a week after Labor Day, but I think it may have crept into there. I'd have to look at the actual calendar and see how many Sundays are in 2020. We have a leap year this year. I might throw everything into disarray. So, I'll have to look at that, because if it were the second week, that'd be kind of odd. And then how are they doing that? Are the Steelers going to be at home, away? You got to think that guys like, I know there's really only, Ben Roethlisberger. That's it, right? He's the only guy still left that played for Cowher. He's going to want to be there, I would imagine, if they're doing the Centennial guys, like second, or even for Troy. So you probably have even some current players, many more that would know Troy. Troy played to 2013, 2014. So there may still be quite a few guys like a Marquise Pouncey or whatever. They're going to want to be there to support their guy. And if you're in the middle of the football season, it just seems odd to me,
I think there's no way it's not started. That's the third Thursday of September.
Oh, geez.
So
okay.
It will have to have been underway, which, look, these are businesses just like any other business, and they're looking at this going, well, why would we do it all at once?
I was trying to figure out how, I thought maybe they would get rid of the silly concert that they do. They moved the game from Sunday, the Hall of Fame game, which, the Steelers, there are a lot of people already rumbling. We were talking about this in the back rooms, and we never brought it forth public, but it was like, it's pretty much a no-brainer. The Steelers are probably going to play in this Hall of Fame game. There may be a lot of attention on the Steelers. They could be on Hard Knocks, although they say you can't refuse Hard Knocks, but from what I've ever heard about the Steelers and Hard Knocks, they want zero involvement in it, and I think they would be, I don't know how forthcoming they would be in helping HBO with that documentary series, but I don't think Tomlin wants that noise around his guys either, but we shall see. But I think the Hall of Fame game you should probably pencil that in already, and maybe even Steelers Cowboys. We'll see. I don't know how many other Cowboys need to still go in, but Jimmy Johnson was announced already, so we'll see how many other. But you think of like great franchises, like I'd have to look at the finalist lists, especially with the Centennial stuff, and see exactly who's still sitting out there from which teams, where they could pair it up and make it like a smart thing to move tickets. You know what I mean? I always think of the Raiders too as like one of those old time franchises that may have some guys hanging in teams like that. So we'll see how that works out. And speaking of football games and being played odd times and whatnot, you had the Saturday-Sunday slate from this past weekend. I think we were pretty much I think we hit the nail on the head with this a little bit. The Vikings-49ers, I don't think we saw the Vikings putting up much of a challenge, running out of steam. The Seahawks, here's another game, Brian, with officiating and stuff like that, Seahawks Packers, but I think we thought that the home teams would mostly rule the roost here. The Chiefs, down 24-0, and we said the Texans were hot cold, and man, were they ever.
and for everybody that was giving Aditi grief about making the comment that Patrick Mahomes can score 21 points in a quarter, you need to now apologize.
Yeah, and I mean, and then of course the big one, and we said, is the clock going to strike midnight, or the Titans going to turn into pumpkins? But we also said the same type of game plan could probably work against the Ravens. I did not envision it playing out the way that it did with this game. And a lot of people are saying, well, the Titans gave the blueprint for the Ravens, but I'm sure the Titans were watching film. They said Buffalo, who we said. We mentioned them as an example. We mentioned the Steelers as an example back in Week 5, the type of things they do, and we said they had the personnel to do it, and they shut down the Ravens. And the Ravens have been doing a lot of this stuff. They've been playing very aggressive. They've been doing a lot of the analytical stuff. You got to understand that some of these things are a gamble. They're a risk. I go back to playing poker. You're looking. Texas Hold'em was my game, and you look at you're looking for a flush. You're looking for a straight on the river. You got 8, 9 cards for your outs that you could hit, and a lot of times, your statistically your probability is about 30-some%. I think 33, depending on which card you're looking for. And that's just going blind. It doesn't count how many other people are in the hand or playing at that point, cards dealt, etc. But just blind. Let's say 30%. And when you're going for it on 4th and longer or anything like that, even 4th and 1 isn't 100% shoe-in guarantee, and their aggressiveness, it finally caught up. And I think they blitzed way more than anybody in the league, too, all season. Yeah. And both of those things, while those gambles paid off in the regular season, this is sudden death. This is do or die here, and the Titans are taking some risks too. They've been connecting on the big plays, and it paid off for them where it didn't pay off for the Ravens. And they're an early exit, Brian. I thought it was possible because I said, hey, the Titans are hot. They remind me of the Steelers out of the 6th seed years ago. The Giants, much the same way. Packers, too, right? 6 seeds. Yep. Some of these 6 seeds, they catch on. They get the right things going. They get healthy, or they make key changes, and they're a freight train that's out of control and, just running over everybody. And that's pretty much Derrick Henry and the Titans right now.
Yeah, it's you just hate to see it. Oh, it's just so sad. You hate to see it. It did make for a lovely day watching the Ravens lose. I have to admit. And look, I was surprised. Like I told you, I mean, the Ravens had been playing like the best team in football. They had been doing things, but as we often say, people catch up to you. You try something new, it works great, it works fantastic, but eventually these guys catch up to you. And when they do, all of a sudden you got to figure out how to adjust to that. Titans did a great job. I thought Vrabel had a great plan going in. While I don't believe I picked the Ravens to lose, I don't think I picked the Titans to win. I wasn't that surprised, as we were talking about. We will see. Look, I think it would be great if the Titans ended up winning the Super Bowl and got all the way there, simply because of the 6 seed story and because Mike Vrabel is an Ohio State alum.
Former Steeler,
former Steeler, Ohio State alum, and I'm going to forget all the other years that he spent at that other place, and just remember the good times.
Yes, just the good times.
But I'd be up for that. They'll have that Chiefs game. Houston, got some great starting, things to happen. The fumbles, getting the block punt, I think, and whatever happened. That all of a sudden they're up 24-0.
First quarter.
First quarter, and you go, okay, well, wow, all right. You turn around and the Chiefs have put up 28 points in the second quarter, and they have the lead at halftime. It's crazy. So, you kind of knew, well, that's it. You thought maybe that Houston was going to pull it off, but after that second quarter, you went, nope, they're done.
Yeah, stick a fork. Well, you still kind of think. You just never know because you've seen Deshaun Watson come in. They beat him in the regular season, so there was still a little bit in the back of my brain that said, hey, if they could get anything going here, and they couldn't generate anything there.
Huge.
I had to bring up I'm not here to rag on the Ravens fans or anything like that. I mean, they had a fantastic regular season, but we often hear, we got a lot of things to talk about because there was the national championship game with college too, which we enjoyed seeing Clemson lose, of course. So I know, much to the dismay of the professor who's a Clemson fan, but
nobody's perfect.
Yeah, well, I didn't hate Clemson until basically they embarrassed Ohio State a few years ago, and then what was basically bank robbery with the other.
Can
game.
I tell you a little secret here?
Yeah, sure.
The Ohio State Clemson Orange Bowl, I believe it was, where Woody Hayes slugged the player. I was there.
Nice.
I was at that game.
Man, I mean, Woody Hayes, that's just, I wish I was alive to experience it. Woody, why'd you go for 2? Because I couldn't go for 3. Although that will be a thing in the XFL, apparently. But I digress. Hey, I need to pull back just a second for, I'm talking about the Ravens here. And Lamar Jackson threw 59 passes. in this game, and it was a 52.54 completion percentage, a touchdown, interception. I mean, if you took those numbers out and just said, hey, he threw for 365 yards and ran for 143, you would have thought that the Ravens won by 50 to something. You know what I mean? You throw that in there, and I mean, it's some of the things we've been saying. The guy, whenever they ask him to pass, I mean, he's only attempted, Brian, in his career. Let me see here. There are 7 games where he's thrown more than 25 passes. Now, one of those was the overtime win against the Steelers, which, obviously they shouldn't have won. He threw 31 and 33 passes against the Browns and Bengals. Good completion percentages, you know what I mean? Again, he threw 34 against the Browns and 37 against the Cardinals, and he's still in that 60. He threw 70% against the Browns. But 2 of the glaring losses here was when they lost to Kansas City in Week 3. They counted on him to throw the ball 43 times, 51% completion, and then 52-5, as I said, throwing 59 times against the Titans. They kind of flipped the script, and they weren't able to jump out to that early lead. And unlike Kansas City, they weren't able to get back in the other direction. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, the Titans, if they beat the Chiefs too, it's just just even stack the deck here against 49ers or Packers. If they go the whole distance, man, one heck of a season with the 4 teams they will have beaten in the postseason. And nobody, there'll be some crazy guy that was drunk and put money on them because he was one of the few Titans fans. Some people were joking about that bandwagon, but it'll be one heck of a close to their season for sure. And regardless of what happens, they had a pretty tremendous year anyway. But I wanted to bring up the Ravens thing real quick because before we get into the other topic and talking about the young man that's going to be coming out of this national championship game, is a lot of people talk about Mike Tomlin's failures. Hey, in 2017 they got the second round bye and they lost to the Jaguars. Oh my God, that's so terrible. Such a terrible coach here. How many playoff wins since the Super Bowl appearance? 3, Brian, or whatever. But he's appeared over those amount of years. How many times in the playoffs? 6 or 7 or whatever. I got the numbers here. I'm going to have to pull them up. But there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, he hasn't won that many games in the last few years. These regular season wins mean nothing. And they also bring up that he won with Bill Cowher's players. And I started to look up John Harbaugh. Because to me, this was kind of interesting. Everybody makes all of these comments about, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. And, Harbaugh, I don't think would be immune to the same type of criticism. You take a look at what's gone on. They first game and they're out of the postseason after going 14-2. Last year, they won the AFC North and lost in the wild card game to the Chargers. The previous 3 years before that, they were 5-11, 8-8, and 9-7, and failed to make the postseason at all. They've won 1 playoff game since winning the Super Bowl in 2012, and that Super Bowl winning team itself had 5 guys that were previously on they came in with Brian Billick as the head coach. And that kind of surprised me when I dug into that. There was Marshall Yanda, there was Elodie Nada, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs. None of those guys are slouches. So when people make the same type of comments about Big Ben being there and Heath and Troy, Hines Ward, and a few others, when Tomlin took the helm for Cowher, this is kind of the same thing. And it's not to really rag on Harbaugh or bring that down, but it's to open some eyes out there as to patience, consistency, and stability within an organization. I know Ozzie Newsome's basically moved on as the GM there, but the ownership, and when Ozzie was there in place and building this team to try and compete for a championship, they just didn't fire this guy. We asked if he was on the hot seat last year. If you remember, that was a big topic where the other 2 guys were gone in the AFC North, Marvin Lewis and Hugh Jackson, and we said they could all be on the hot seat. But the Ravens, they weathered the storm there. They've won the division twice. There may not be playoff wins that have accompanied it, no matter how good or bad their seasons have been, but that shouldn't be a reflection on whether someone or not is a good or bad coach, because you don't know if the grass is going to be greener on the other side. If you're just willy-nilly fire the guy and you get some, I don't know, a wide receiver coach from somewhere, or a 1 or 2 year offensive coordinator that has no head coach experience, again when you're talking about the Cleveland Browns. I just think it's relative to compare apples to apples here when you're talking about the Ravens. I'm sure fans are unhappy that they had an early exit from the postseason, but again, you're riding this wave. They could be a team that's 9-7 and doesn't make the postseason next year. Who knows? And then the Steelers could be on the rebound and be a team that's in the postseason. You just don't go and have knee-jerk reactions when something doesn't go your way in one game.
Right. There's no question about that. And as you said, the similarities between what has gone on with Tomlin and what's gone on with Harbaugh recently. You cannot avoid them, and people who want to just say, well, it's different with Harbaugh. No, it's the same. It's the same. If you're going to hold one coach to the same criteria, you got to hold them all to the same criteria, be that as it may. So I don't think I can add much to that because it just is. People like to be inconsistent. They more hate their own guy than they hate other guys. I don't understand why that is, but. But, no, my guy is more stinky because he's my guy and I'm mad at him. Whereas that other guy, he may have done the same things, but he's really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tomlin's getting the flack from ever since the Super Bowl. He's won 3 out of, I think, 7 playoff games. I have it here somewhere. Well, they've won the division 3 times. And they made the playoffs 5 out of 9 seasons, okay? Everybody always wants to make this comparison with Bill Belichick, and it's like, when you talk about the Patriots, they've done things that no one has done. That's not a comparison that you can make. But when you look at, Harbaugh, he's won 1 playoff game out of the 3 times in 7 seasons that they've made the playoffs. And I think most people right now, with all the talk of, we're talking about drafting quarterbacks and stuff, and they want to get like somebody like Jalen Hurts on the Steelers roster because they see what Lamar Jackson did. And it's like, well, now hold your horses. Maybe the blueprint is out there after getting some film and stuff when you force the guy to do certain things. And I'm not writing it off. I mean, they could still be a 13-win team next year. Who knows? But teams in the NFL will adjust. There's always been the fads. We've seen it happen with the 49ers and Kaepernick. We've seen it happen with RG3 and the Redskins when that was such the big thing. You had such a dual threat with Cam Newton too. And I mean, these things sometimes fade over time. I mean, I remember Warren Moon and the run and shoot offense. You know what I mean? There's always something out there. And the same goes with defenses, the zone blitz and things like that of that nature. It's a constant evolution in the NFL. And I don't think necessarily that evolution is, hire a guy for 1 year and then move on. There's a reason. Not
normally.
No, not normally. The Ravens fairly mirror what the Steelers have been doing over the years, what the Packers traditionally they do. I know they got a new head coach and they've reinvigorated some things, but that's because they've had some bad seasons. And you see what happens when you get another diva quarterback. If you want to call Ben a diva, you got to call Aaron Rodgers a diva. And he got McCarthy fired. This isn't the Cowboys where Jason Garrett has done absolutely squat and gets sent out of there with all their high dollar talent and stuff too. So the reason I'm bringing up some of this, we're going to come back to this later and talk about the Ravens and Browns and how this fits in, is because, I'm watching the national championship game, you're watching Joe Burrow, and simultaneously I'm watching people on social media throughout the night, and today they're all like in a tizzy over what Burrow has done this year, and everybody thinks he should be the number 1 overall draft pick. I don't have any argument against it, to be completely honest. And of course, that pick is held by the Bengals. So now it's all of a sudden we're connecting dots that necessarily aren't there yet. It's like, okay, Burrow, assuming that the Bengals draft him, then all of a sudden assuming that he's going to be a great quarterback. He's going to be Peyton Manning right out of college, and he's going to lift this team to unforeseen heights, and the Steelers are going to have to contend with that twice a year, and kind of, we don't know that yet, and it's like one of those things, even if he were to be great, Brian, that's not the only team that's going to have to contend with them twice a year. The Ravens and Browns aren't going to be able to pile on and get easy victories against the Bengals either, so it's going to kind of balance things out, I think, with the division. And you look around the division and you look at we look at Lamar Jackson, and everyone's going to call him a running back, and I still think it's a fair label. I mean, I don't want to necessarily downplay his talents and the uniqueness of their offense. It works for what they were doing this year. Baker Mayfield, hey, I told everybody this isn't a surefire thing. He had a number 1 draft pick and a tight end. I know he was unhealthy and not available for like half the games, but he also had 2 of the top wide receivers, all pro guys in the NFL. And he's basically like almost leading the league in interceptions, and they didn't even have a better record than last season. So those are both Heisman guys there. And I look at Burrow and I'm like, I don't know, man. He goes to the Bengals. I wouldn't necessarily call it a sure thing.
You got to remember that there is, as far as quarterback goes, there is no such thing as a sure thing. There's probably a majority of top quarterback talent that gets drafted that ends up flaming out and doing nothing, much more so than there is a ratio that says they become franchise Hall of Fame level quarterbacks. It just is what it is. Now, that being said, I don't want to take anything away from Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has shown a lot of really good traits that should translate well to the NFL, and he looks like a guy who could be a success. But then again, so did Ryan Leaf.
Well, you're going way back. We're going way back with Leaf, but yeah.
I'm just saying, it's not, that's the classic didn't make it kind of guy. And you do have to respect the fact that the team he's going to has more than just one problem. And that, quarterbacks can be broken, when they are put in a bad situation, because it can shatter their confidence. And sometimes they can't recover from that. So just the fact that Joe Burrow comes to Cincinnati, if in fact that's what they do, because remember, this is the Bengals we're talking about. Don't be surprised if they pick somebody else. Just because. Yeah. They're the Bengals.
And then the guy would go to a better situation maybe and become a star, and it would you'd automatically link that he would have been a star in Cincinnati too, which may not be the case. They may not have A.J. Green. We've talked about their offensive line for years, and I mean, they've tried to draft and sign people. Who they ended up starting a tackle by the end of the year was Fred Johnson, he made the Steelers 53. We liked him, but he was an undrafted rookie. They were in such shambles, and I understand maybe they get the Daniels guy back that they drafted. Who knows? Billy Price has almost kind of been a bust. Hate to say that about our Buckeyes, but we thought that was a good fit for them. And there's another classic example of can't miss and swing and a miss. You know what I mean? You never know. Tyler Eifert's never healthy. Who knows if he's even back? And they have Boyd, they have Mixon, but that's not much different than putting Duck Hodges or Mason Rudolph there and trying to run the football, and you can't, and just force the guy to throw. You know what I mean? And we've seen Tim Couch. There's so many guys there, but I'm going to stick with the actual Bengals roster for a second. They got a lot of other work that they need to do. They got a lot of guys on defense that are starting to get on the wrong side of that age, where Father Time starts calling. I know they got some guys in their secondary that are okay, but I watched Sean Williams get absolutely abused by some different teams throughout the year. He's one of their safeties. I know we liked Jesse Bates, William Jackson III. There's Dre Kirkpatrick, who tends to get posterized every other game too. And, you got Geno Atkins up there, and you're like, okay, well, how much longer? Some of these guys, you're eventually getting into where the Steelers started to move on from a lot of their guys like Casey Hampton, et cetera. It's some of their linebackers, James Ferrier and stuff of that nature. They're kind of in that position, too. You got a guy that was a first-year head coach who just posted the worst record in the league. You don't even know if he's going to be a good coach. Now, they beat Cleveland in the final week of the season. I mean, I don't know if that speaks to rallying the troops or the Browns completely falling off the rails or what. But, I mean, these are all things you have to consider as part of the equation, and you still don't know what's going to happen between now and then. Burrow at the Combine, you would assume he posts good numbers and stuff, and he's the darling, but you still don't know. There's things, particularly Brian, the one good year. I know he threw 60 touchdowns and 5,800 yards or whatever, but his previous season, let me see here, I had it. Okay, he only had 6 interceptions this year, but he had that last year too on 16 touchdowns. Let me see here. 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 57.8 completion percentage. That's not hot. That's not an NFL number. I know it's his junior year and it's a new system, but just under 2,900 yards or half, and only a quarter of the touchdowns and almost the same amount of interceptions. So you had a lot of people make the same arguments about like others, and particularly in the back of my head right now is like Mitchell Trubisky, maybe even Sam Darnold, to be completely honest. But Trubisky is the guy where it's like, hey, this guy only had 31 true starts or whatever. You're bringing him in. Is he going to be NFL capable? And at times he looked okay. This year he looked like he was going to get benched. Burrow, he has 28 games.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay or take away his steam. He's holding the trophy. He's feeling good, today over all that. But, I'll get into it in a moment with all the Heisman Trophy winning guys and how many of them haven't worked out. But just looking at some recent guys who had success and in the college ranks and haven't translated that in the pros, we talk about it all the time. Just being a first-round pick or a number one pick doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be inducted into Canton anytime soon.
Yep. There's no question about that. That's my question is let's go back and find all of the Hall of Fame and Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. And you'll see it just, it doesn't happen all the time. Again, I like Joe Burrow. I think he can be good, but he doesn't have me quaking in my boots going to the Bengals because it's the Bengals. And while it wouldn't be a bad thing for, the Bengals and the Browns and the Ravens to suddenly get better in the sense of because, well, actually, let me revisit that. It would be a bad thing because if we're all feeding off of each other, which is the way it's been for years anyway, it just, again, it would be nice if everybody but us stunk. But, so we could have a little Patriots fever going on in our division, where they have 20 years of dominance because the other three teams in their division can't figure out how to play football. But, it's not necessarily bad for the other teams to be able to beat each other, right? So you kind of do want them to be good because you want to have a decent game. I say that knowing that many people are going to go, no, we don't, because I sort of don't either. But well, in fairness, you got to be honest and say, a rookie quarterback coming in to the situation that the Bengals have should not terrify you, no matter who he is, because the Bengals have other issues that they need to resolve. And that doesn't take anything away from Joe Burrow or whether he's going to be a good quarterback in the NFL or not. It simply states the quarterback doesn't fix all problems.
No, it doesn't. And you know what? In 1998, the most surefire pick ever. Yeah, in my recent memory, they actually had two surefire picks here. But the Indianapolis Colts, they went 3-13 in 1997. Brian, that's when they were able to get Peyton Manning, and guess what? They went that first year. 3-13 again. It wasn't, it was some growing pains. You had Jim Mora there, and they end up going 13-3 and then 10-6. And what ends up happening is they're one and done in the playoffs in 1999. They're one and done in the playoffs in 2000, and then they go 6-10 under Jim Mora again with Peyton Manning. And this was right before the division realignment, so they were in the basement twice of those first 4 years under Peyton Manning. And then, eventually we know how that turned out, but they also had the label of the choke artist thing going for them as far as the Indianapolis Colts. Another one I think of too, and I always bring up Aaron Rodgers and, his first 4 years, and they had him sitting, and there was a lot of people that, if you remember, even going back to the draft, it was him and Alex Smith. These are the top two guys, can't miss. And then Smith gets drafted by the 49ers. Aaron Rodgers kind of just sits there collecting dust to pick 22 or whatever the Packers ended up getting him at. And, there was a little bit of buzz about that. And then he sat, and then we're like, well, this is a good situation because we don't know how much longer Brett Favre will play. And they force him out of town, and then they have a losing record and don't make the playoffs when they finally do pull the trigger on that and make Rodgers their guy. And eventually, that kind of ship steered around too. But it's not like, they're this dynasty. They're not doing Patriot things. So, obviously the Packers are one of the top teams, but there's also years where they fall too. So it's not all doom and gloom, so to speak. I know the Colts kind of own the division there, but they were also, they had an expansion team that came in with the Houston Texans in their division and things of that nature too that kind of helped force the hand there. But you also look at, we could look at first round NFL quarterbacks. We could also look at Heisman Trophy winners too, and some of those go hand in hand. Now, I don't necessarily want to. I don't know if we could say enough about Jackson, Mayfield, and Murray, even though I, dogged two of these guys already a little bit. They're 2 years into their career. We still don't know how that might play out. Same with Murray. Murray 1 year. But Murray comes in, he didn't turn things around immediately. Mayfield didn't turn things around immediately. Jackson, they had stability there. Good franchise, okay? I'll give that the credit. And, of course, the Steelers falling apart helped the Ravens win that division in 2018. But you look around at some of the other guys. Marcus Mariota, okay, he may get a Super Bowl ring this year, but not as a starter.
Nope.
And he's been relegated to gadget play and benched otherwise behind Ryan Tannehill. Who would have thunk it, There's Jameis Winston. Here's another guy, 30 for 30 club. He's the only NFL quarterback in history to throw at least 30 touchdown passes and 30 interceptions in the same season.
And wants $30 million.
Would you pay him?
No.
I don't know what you do there. It's not like, they've turned that franchise around either. At least in Mariota, and Mariota's been hurt too. But at least in the Titans' case, they've at least posted some winning record. They were like 9-7 over the last 3-4 seasons in a row, making or missing the playoffs because you need to win double digits to ensure a playoff spot in the NFL, as we've figured out over the years with the Steelers as well. Johnny Manziel. He played. He went to the Canadian League and sucked too. Let's see. You have RG3, who lost his job. He had that one good year we were just talking about. He lost his job to Kirk Cousins, who was like, when did Kirk Cousins get drafted? Like, he was a day 3 guy for sure. I don't remember which round. I'm going to find that out. Fast enough internet gets it done here, buddy. Fourth rounder. Oh, man, I was off. I thought he was like a 5th rounder for some reason, but that's okay. A guy taken in the 4th round still steals your job. Yikes. You were a Heisman Trophy winner. We talk about Cam Newton. He exploded. He had that one big year. He hasn't been the most accurate guy. He's been playing 9 years, and they've only had the Carolina Panthers only had 3 winning seasons. You can't really count this past year, so let's say 3 out of 8 instead of 3 out of 9. But because he got hurt this year and wasn't playing. But still, far from a guaranteed thing that your franchise is going to win because you go and get the Heisman guy. Sam Bradford couldn't stay healthy. He bounced around all over the place. Tim Tebow, we remember that guy.
Yep.
Here's one, Brian. I forgot about this one. Troy Smith. A Buckeye.
Oh, yeah.
And the Steelers even signed him, and he didn't even get to camp. They signed him in like January, like right around this time, and he got cut in like June. Just after some OTAs and whatnot. There's a lot more too. Matt Leinart, Carson Palmer, Eric Crouch, Chris Weinke. You go back into the 90s, there's Ty Detmer, Gino Torretta, Miami Hurricanes guy, Danny Warfel with Florida. And then there's maybe one of the most famous busts of all time as far as the Heismans with Doug Flutie. These are all the guys who have won the Heisman. I'm not leaving any names off here. I went all the way back into the 90s and even the 80s with Flutie. Carson Palmer is probably the only decent guy, and he went to the Bengals, and the Bengals still didn't win anything. And he had T.O. and Ocho Cinco and all these other guys, and they still didn't have any success. So it's far from a given. It's far from a guarantee.
Absolutely, that's the point. Yes, it's there's this storyline about having all these young quarterbacks, but I'm the first to say that Lamar Jackson has performed better than I thought he would. But I'm also going to be the first to say that Baker Mayfield is doing exactly what I thought he would. So,
yep.
So there you go. I'm not scared. That's the thing. I'm not scared of any of these guys in the division. I just am like, it's fine. We'll deal with it. One way or another, you're going to play. If Joe Burrow lights the world on fire, but he's in Jacksonville, guess what? You're still going to end up playing him at some point if you want to get to the big game. So having him in division doesn't scare me to begin with, even if he is the next GOAT, which I'm not, I'm not saying he's not, but I'm not saying he is. We'll have to wait and see.
He's the shiny toy. He's the shiny toy.
He's the shiny toy, and everybody wants him. And as soon as somebody sees something else in the draft that they think is their new shiny toy, they're going to want him too. Everybody will be complaining, trust me, about this draft and the Steelers in relating to we should have gots. But it is what it is. Remember, your first round pick's name is Minkah Fitzpatrick, and he was worth it. That's what you got to remember.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not going to complain about that whatsoever. I mean, you just that's proven already. You already know what you got for your first round pick, other than otherwise with the unknown. So, a little tongue tied. But I was looking at the list of quarterbacks drafted. This year's class was Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins, Drew Lock, who, it took a while for Lock to get on the field. I guess he was banged up. Will Greer in the third round. I know somebody said to trade for him. No, stop it. Stop it. He couldn't even beat out Kyle Allen after Cam Newton got hurt. What do you think is going on there? It's not like the Panthers were like this amazing team. Hey, let's give the guy a look. And it wasn't very good. Ryan Finley, who went to the Bengals too. I'm not going to go through all the guys. I mean, like Gardner Minshew in the 6th or something like that. I'm going to try to stick to these first rounders. You had 5 of them the year before. Obviously, we mentioned Mayfield, Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen. Already, we don't know what's going on there. Lamar Jackson. Then, of course, Mason Rudolph was next in the 3rd round of that particular draft. You have Mitchell Trubisky. Then you have Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. And then you go to Deshaun Kaiser and got Davis Webb, C.J. Beathard, Josh Dobbs, Nathan Peterman when it comes to that class. And I'm going over more than just first rounders, but I'm just, this is cursory knowledge here of just how hard it is to make it in the NFL. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, and in that first round, Paxton Lynch.
Woo!
Yikes, 2016 there. The next guy, second round, Christian Hackenberg. Man, the hits keep on rolling. Then there's Jacoby Brissett, Cody Kessler, Connor Cook. Then you go Dak Prescott and Cardell Jones. I mean, it's a pretty interesting mix there and where you think people are supposed to land and their expectations coming in the league. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and Garrett Grayson in 2015, and Sean Mannion, the latter two being third-round picks, nobody in the second round. 2014, Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, the top two, man. And you go Teddy Bridgewater to close out the first. Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo each in the second round. E.J. Manuel, first-round pick of the Buffalo Bills in 2013. Geno Smith falls to the Jets in the second round. Value pick there, Brian. Mike Glennon in the third. Matt Barkley, Ryan Nassib, Tyler Wilson, and Landry Jones in the fourth. Andrew Luck overall, 2012, you got the class with Andrew Luck, RG3, Ryan Tannehill, and Brandon Weeden all going in the first round. Brock Osweiler was a second rounder, and everyone missed on Russell Wilson. He goes to the Seahawks in the third with Nick Foles as well. Kirk Cousins is there in that class as well in the fourth round of 2012. I'm going to go back 2 more years here just to close this out. 2011, Cam Newton, Titans were still searching for their guy, Jake Locker. They eventually ended up playing Blaine Gabbert at one point, I think, too, who went to the Jaguars, and Christian Ponder to the Vikings, all first-round picks. Andy Dalton and Colin Kaepernick in the second round, Ryan Mallett in the third, and 2010, because it's basically looking at the last decade, first-round picks. Sam Bradford, number 1 overall to the Rams. Tim Tebow goes to the Broncos. I remember that was very controversial at that time, 25th overall. And then Jimmy Clausen in the second, Colt McCoy in the third, and a bunch of other guys that really haven't hung around, had maybe a cup of coffee in the league. So, how many of those guys truly made it? Out of all the names that you say, you're going to remember some of them for playing, but you're not going to remember most of them for playing well. And I think that's just, pump the brakes here. We don't need to crown this guy king just yet. It's good he's the prince. Enjoy the moment. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch going forward. And, obviously when, we're Steelers homers like we say we are, you kind of hope that they just end up sucking anyway. I won't lie. It will not hurt my feelings one bit if they draft Burrow and it blows up in their face. I don't ever want to really say that truly about any young man. I want to see everybody be successful and have a nice NFL career. I'm not that much of a jerk in real life anyways. I don't know, my wife would disagree, but
No.
It also wouldn't break my heart to see the Bengals be the Bengals for another, 10, 15 years or so, too. Well, the Steelers figure out their post-Ben Roethlisberger stuff 5 years down the road or whatever.
Yeah, my dream scenario would be to have the Bengals draft a shiny object wide receiver, and then they don't have anybody to throw to him, and let Joe Burrow fall a couple spots and go to a team that might be better prepared for him.
Well, my thing with the Bengals, too, is like, what did they do with Andy Dalton? Because, they benched him to see what Finley was going to do, which I think we all knew what was going to happen there. They had to know if he was the guy or whatever. I think their season was in the toilet already. They just threw it away. And then even when I was there for that game in Cincinnati, fans were calling to put Dalton back in. And he could have won them that game much the same way Devlin Hodges won it for the Steelers coming in for Rudolph. And, that's the coaching decision that wasn't made. But,
right.
And that's how you win and lose games. And that would have been an embarrassing one for the Steelers and, really set things in motion a lot earlier than we would have liked it to. It was nice still being in contention. But, Andy Dalton, I think, is making $17 million this year. And they could basically save all of that if they were to get him off the books, release him, trade him, whatever, and I'm sure there'll be suitors, you know what I mean, because he has starting experience, but the question is, should the Bengals do that? Because we just talked about Tim Couch, and we talk about some of the other rookies that get thrown out there, they start right away, and it might be better to pull back on that and let them sit for a few years, because even like Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning weren't, they had their struggles, I'm going to say. And for one reason or another, Peyton Manning, it's not all him either. He was a good quarterback. I don't know that he necessarily stunk out the joint. I'm going to pull up I have his numbers in front of me. He didn't have his worst season as far as a pro, aside from his final year when his arm turned into a noodle, was as a rookie. That's the only time he was under 60% completion percentage. One of the few times he ever threw for under 4,000 yards, you throw out that final year. And of course, he didn't play a full season that final year in Denver either. And you know what? He threw 28 interceptions to 26 touchdowns then, too. So, it's definitely a learning curve, even if you are considered one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history.
Yeah, it is what it is. There's, as they say, there's no guarantees in life, and there's certainly no guarantees in drafting a quarterback in the NFL. So a lot of this it's just, as you said, he won the national championship. It's his shiny new toy. Everybody's scared, and don't be scared. That's all. Just don't be scared.
Yeah. And, that's about all we could say. And we're starting to speculate on draft already. We're starting to speculate on team needs. We're starting to speculate on free agency. We'll be covering that in upcoming episodes here. I think free agency is our next major one to kind of knock out, because we've mentioned some names in previous episodes, but we got to put some things in priority and say who can they afford to get rid of and not. The one thing we can say is that if you listen to the previous episode, they're not going to be able to afford a whole lot. They're going to be looking for coins in the couch cushions as far as the Steelers salary cap space. So, folks, when you see these free agent lists that are out there and people are talking about Dak Prescott and Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill and Phillip Rivers and Teddy Bridgewater and Winston and Mariota, one of those, maybe two of those guys at most are going to hit free agency as far as quarterbacks. And even if they do, the Steelers will not be able to afford them because they're already paying Ben. And because they're paying Ben, they're not going to be able to go after Melvin Gordon or Derrick Henry or just any of these other guys that pop up on this list. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. And, even A.J. Green, the money he's going to probably want, even if it's a one-year thing, they still can't afford it. And you know what? He's already hit that magic age we always talk about on this program, that after age 31, the wide receivers usually fall off a cliff. I think there's like 10% or less that continue to do great things for even an extra year, let alone several. So in that regard, just cool it, just chill on all the free agents. The Steelers are going to load up with all their all-stars. They got some guys that made the Pro Bowl the year before that were not part of a significant part of this team this past season, that maybe if they're at full health, Ben Roethlisberger, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, maybe that'll be the difference with the offense. So we'll be talking about that going forward, but just, man, I'll tell you what, some of the people are already talking about, take a stab at Derrick Henry. The Titans aren't even out of this yet. They're still playing football. So that guy's not leaving the building. I don't think Tannehill is either, and he's certainly not going to leave the building after what he just did with them to go sit on the bench behind somebody somewhere else.
No, absolutely not. And even if Derrick Henry gets out of Tennessee, we can't afford him.
Yeah, and it's going to be the tight ends too, because everybody's going to talk about, well, we talked about this. Go back to the other episode, cutting Vance McDonald. It saves you some money, but it's not going to be enough money to get anybody better than Jesse James. So that's where it boils down to. Brian, thanks once again for joining me today. I am so glad that we're always on the same page and very level-headed. I don't think people sometimes, we do some of our homework before this, but I mean, just some of this is just you and I just getting along, being two Steelers bros here, and being level-headed and logical, which isn't something that you usually see out there on the internet anymore.
Those two terms don't generally go hand in hand, logical and internet. The interwebs never heard of logic. For the most part.
No, does not exist anywhere. But all right, folks, that'll be a wrap for us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. We encourage all of our listeners out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.